the coach. His name was Dustin Felder, because remember, it was an acting class I had never done. So he was like, stand-up comedy is your into the industry.
Of all the teachers, I said the one guy that really made an impact that was palpable and tangible and gave me a different outlook was Bill Hall.
My dad, he's been in law enforcement for over 20 years. He taught like the 4 rules of gun safety.
It was always the mess, but like right out of the gate, it was Carter and Keith Hernandez. Those were the guys.
You know, I just want to say thank you. I've been watching you since I was a kid. Like I watched the Chappelle Show, and we would recite that shit all the time.
It surprised me how much I enjoyed. I coached my daughter's softball team this year. It was one of the best times of my life.
I dedicated this to Angela because I would not have done any of the stuff that I've been doing had it not been for her.
What's up? Welcome to episode number 151 of the People We Love podcast. I am Adam Choate. For more about this podcast, please check out peoplewelovepodcast.com. That's peoplewelovepodcast.com. That goes right to my link tree, where you can see all the links to subscribe, to follow the show on all the social media and all the things like that. I'm at Adam Choate on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to follow me, it's at People We Love Podcast on Instagram for the show. AdamChoate.com for all my personal stuff, projects, other things are there. That also links to another link tree. But for today's episode of this show, we have Northeast Ohio's own Alice Always. She's probably best known for her work on the Put a Fork in It podcast with her husband, also named Adam, and the Scissor Me Timbers show with Jessica Fenske, aka Forest Mommy. Both shows are on YouTube and Rumble. Growing up in a large family with 4 siblings, in some ways, Alice really did have 2 childhoods, with the latter version being much more challenging into her teens, as her dad fell ill with multiple sclerosis, and she herself was the victim of unfortunate abuse. But Alice's story is an inspiring one of perseverance, where she tells me all about her family and loving parents, Mary and Frank. And I really appreciate Alice sharing a lot of personal stuff in this episode with me. But let's just get started. It sounded darker than it was, but this one really was a lot of fun too. So let's just get started for sure. Here's Alice Always. Okay, so it's good to see you today, Alice Always. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Oh, for sure. How are you holding up during whatever year this is?
Pretty good, I guess.
No, that's good. I mean, it's all relative, I guess. But you know, either you want to be positive, either in your tone or your words, and you kind of got it in the in the words. Well, I don't know. It was a mixed bag all around, but positive.
2022 was much better. Like 2022 was a great year, and then the first half. First half of 2023 was okay, and then the end of 2023 and now into 24, it's just been a lot of life-changing stuff. So, and some of it's good, some of it's bad, and you know, I just want it to be all good all the time, but that's just
don't we all?
Yeah, I mean that's just life. So I'm just happy that it's not all bad. So.
All right. Well, where are you located right now? I want to get into your life and go way back, of course. But where are you located right now?
So I live in Northeast Ohio. I actually live in the house that I grew up in. So
very cool.
I grew up in the town that I live in the town that I grew up in. Yeah, this was my bedroom at one point. Now it's my kid's classroom, but. Yeah, I never really moved a lot until I met my husband, who moved around a lot, and we lived in a few different places, and then we landed here because we moved in with my dad, who was dying, and it was a good opportunity. I didn't want to move again. I told my husband, I was like, if I have to move with you one more time, I'm going to divorce you.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack and unwrap right there, and I appreciate you sharing that. And sorry about your you're laughing. I'm about to like say something very, very serious, and you're like cracking up. I'm just be like, sorry to hear about your father and all that, because I have heard you talk about your dad a little bit on different podcasts and in the Forest Mommy universe. It's good to connect through her as well, like for
Yeah.
sure. Why don't we get into your background a little bit and tell me like where? Well, you're telling me where I know where you grew up. You grew up in that house, but you could tell me about your family and siblings and even like earliest memories growing up in that room.
Well, I have actually every room in this house, every bedroom has been my bedroom at one point. So this was the last bedroom I had before I moved back in.
Is it? I
Um,
mean, it's funny. It's funny because I asked this question usually way later towards the end of the podcast, almost as like a survey type question. But do you believe in ghosts? Have you had any experiences? But what's it? I mean, we'll just get right into that. Like, what's it like being in the house you grew up in now? Do you almost like do ghosts of the past haunt you? You can answer that however you want.
yes. Definitely weird stuff has happened in my house. And I know like some people are like, it's just coincidence. And I just think some things are too many coincidences. And where I sleep every night is actually exactly where my dad died. So that's where I sleep every night. And there's times where I'll be in bed and I think my cat jumped up into the bed and I can feel something there, and I open my eyes and there's no cat. But yeah, I mean, people say stuff like that. It's just coincidence or whatever, but I don't think so. There was one time I was reading a book after my dad died, and my dad would not have approved of the book that I was reading, and all the lights went out in our room. And no other lights went off. It was actually in this room, the light overhead and our light on the side, everything went off, and we're just like, oh.
Yeah, it's funny how you laugh at all this stuff. But yeah, I feel like I just talking to people on the show and in general and in life, like too many people have stories that are kind of similar to what you're describing for like there not to be something going on beyond that which we understand in the visual perceivable world, so to speak. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who the hell
Yeah.
knows?
And I mean, it seems crazy, but and some people say, well, you just want that to be, you hope for it to be. And it's like, well, of course I'm hoping for it to be. I hope that the people that I love that have passed on are, still with me in some way. Before my dad died, this is a crazy story. And I used to like never tell it because it just sounds so crazy, but it's the truth. I swear over everything I love that this happened. So before my dad died, my dad and I were talking about how a lot of people say that when people from the other realm or who have passed on will reach out through electricity type things, whether it be lights or the radio and stuff like that. So I said to my dad, I'm like, we should pick a song for you to play for me after you die so that I know that you're okay. And I'm like, but it can't be a sad song. It has to be, a happier song. So I don't get too upset every time I hear it. But we never picked a song. So the night that my dad died, like some of my family was here, one of my friends was here, and then people started to leave and then it was just me. And I just had random music playing on Spotify. And I went in the bathroom and I'm kind of like going through that. What am I going to do? Because my whole life, a big part of it was taking care of this man. And He was my best friend and my mentor. And what am I going to do? And I walked into my living room, and I shit you not, Matchbox 20, Our Song was playing. And the first words I could hear was the chorus saying, "This could be our song." And I was just crazy. And then listening to the song, it is a song that very much could be, a part of me and my dad. And I'm a huge Matchbox 20 fan. And my dad, I would communicate to him through music sometimes and like tell him this song reminds me of this. And Matchbox 20, we both really enjoyed their music. So for it to be that playing, it was just weird. And I know people could say like it's just pure coincidence, but I'm like, come on.
It's interesting you say that you were like, some people say, oh, you're looking for that. But like maybe that's like part of what makes the magic, the spiritual connection thing happen, is the requirement of the belief in it. I just remember that. I keep coming back to that. Like, I can't explain it in great comprehensible way, but like the particle slit experiment, basically some particles behave differently when they were being watched versus when they were like not being watched in real time. And
Yeah.
and that like makes me think that like, thoughts and prayers matter if they're done with intention. Jesus and all the lords and Buddha, Muhammad, they all know if there's intention behind the T's and P's. T's and P's definitely don't work without intention.
Right. So, I mean, that kind of stuff does bring me comfort. Sometimes it's aggravating because I swear to God, my mom hides things from me.
What was your dad's name, and what was he dealing with? And then I want to go back to further back.
My dad's name was Frank.
And what was he dealing with medically? I think you talked about it.
Yeah, so he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when I was 11. He was diagnosed with progressive multiple sclerosis. So, he progressed very quickly. His speech started slurring. He couldn't really walk. He had a walker, and but my parents owned a business. They owned a grocery store at the time. He wouldn't use a walker. He would push a cart around because he didn't want to be seen with a walker. And then when I was 17, he broke his hip and he never walked again after that. So I had a very different childhood and a very different outlook on marriage because of that. Because when you see your parent my mom had to step up and be the breadwinner. She had to take care of my dad. And you really see what sickness and health and death to us part is like up close. So it definitely made me look at marriage differently.
What was your
mom?
What's your mom's name?
Mary. She was named after the Virgin Mary. She did not live up to that name.
No comment.
Not even remotely. Not like in like so much that way, but my mom was pretty wild. Me and Adam call her the Beast.
Yeah, your husband's name is Adam as well. So
yeah.
Mine.
So everybody knows when I say Adam, that's my husband's name.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, she was a very fierce, very strong woman. And my mom, like how a lot of women will try and preach feminism. My mom just taught me what it was to be a strong woman. There was no like women this, women that. She just taught me what it was to be a strong woman. And she talked to me about things that women will go through without life. And I mean, in a way, she just kind of did have and you're just going to have to deal with it. Or you're going to be miserable.
Through her action, she showed you her strength, is what it sounds like, that more than through her words. And that's yeah, I mean, wow, she had to bear quite the load, and as you did later in your and throughout your your childhood from a certain age on, that's tough. I mean, people will talk about like oh, a marriage should be 50-50, blah 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 blah. I wrote a book where everything should be a co-decision and a co-thing, but I don't think that's necessarily. I can't. I mean, you can comment on it as well. I can comment from past failures in my life, but. But even people who say like, oh, nothing is balanced, nothing is perfect. No one wants it to be 90-10. Like no one's looking for like that in terms of someone to like bear like that much responsibility. That's a hard thing. And really you want to I think one wants to strive in relations to have like more, balance in terms of who's putting like emotional effort as well as physical, like all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot for your mom to take on. And that's yeah, like you saw, till death do us part play and stuff out. That's wild and tough. That's something. Do you have siblings, you said?
I do. I have 4.
Four.
I
So
have,
wow, okay.
Yeah, I have 2 older sisters. They're 12 years older than me. They're twins. And then I have a brother that's 10 years older than me, and then a brother that's 5 years older than me.
And these are all the same you don't have to draw the family tree, but these are all the same.
Oh yeah, yeah. My mom and dad were actually conservative.
You're saying because they didn't believe in the BC, the birth control?
Yeah, well, I mean, they just really lived that life. They like truly believed in, loyalty, faithfulness,
Family.
I mean, and they really truly put that first in their life. And I'm just saying, there may be some popular conservatives and political pundits that they just kind of talk that way, but they don't actually live that truth. But my parents really did, but my parents weren't like Republicans or anything. Not that that's bad. I don't mean that bad.
No,
I'm just saying.
yeah, just like who they kind of are culturally,
Yeah.
whatever. Did all your siblings grow up in that house that you're in right now?
No. I'm the only one that grew up in this house. My brother that was 5 years older than me, he was really young though. He was like, want to say like 3 or 4. So yeah, the other siblings, they were kind of quite a bit older when they moved here. So they kind of had they lived God. They lived in another house for like I think like 10 years though before this. So to them that was kind of I think more their childhood home in a way.
But mostly in Ohio and Northeast Ohio. You're near
Yeah.
You're near Cleveland or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'm like well, it depends on where you go in Cleveland. Like Hex, Hex.
Yeah.
Right? He lives in Cleveland. He lives like 15, 20 minutes from here.
Close.
Yeah. And then my parents owned a business here. Well, not here, but in a town by here. And they used to live in that town, and then they moved here for the land. And
where's here? What town are you in? I'm
North Royalton.
North Royalton. Yeah, you don't have to give out your address. Show me a picture of your mailbox and the numbers on your. No. You said you were the youngest of five. Did I count that correctly?
Yeah.
I want to know like a little bit like kind of like before your dad got sick, like what was life like being the youngest of 5 in Northeast Ohio? What were you into? What was your kind of like your, I guess, role in the family, so to speak?
So I was the baby everywhere. I was the baby of the siblings. I was the baby of the cousins on both sides. So, I mean, everybody loved me.
Yeah, look at this laughter and this smile. I can only imagine. And that's not, you didn't, that's not, I would be shocked if that's something you discovered later in your life. You're like, I was a miserable goth child. Like maybe everyone goes through phases, but like the laughter.
I mean, it didn't last. but no, I mean, yeah, I mean, everybody loved me for the most part. I was a daddy's girl. Um my life was pretty wholesome up until my dad got, I mean, and even after a while after my dad got sick, it was still pretty wholesome. But yeah, I mean, we would go to the park just for whatever reason. We would be leaving my parents' store. There's this really nice metro park area that goes through our town and through a few other towns here. And we would just stop and we would just walk around the park. We would come home and my dad would cook on the grill and we would play wiffle ball and volleyball and badminton and have fires. And yeah, I mean, family Christmases. We used to have big July 4th parties with all of our friends, all of our family. It was, yeah, it was pretty wholesome.
That's cool. What were you into as far as like well, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but like music, and were you into movies and pop culture and other stuff like that at that
Yeah.
age?
Oh yeah, because so my parents own that business, right?
Is
And
a grocery store, supermarket?
yeah, it was a little convenience store. It
Oh,
was
okay.
part of a chain. I don't know if you have I mean, it's just called Convenient Food Mart, but it was part of a chain. And up front, they would have all the magazines, like Teen Bop, People Magazine. And I love to read it. I mean, yeah, I would have books at the store, but well, you only read so many books. And then, yeah, I mean, I was a normal kid. I loved music. I really, really loved music. I loved music a lot. So I would sit there and read all about celebrities and my favorite rock stars. I remember Princess Diana and all the big hoopla around her. And it was just like every magazine was Princess Diana. And yeah. And then as I started to get older and my dad got sicker and I was dealing with some other stuff, I really got into heavy metal for a little bit. I mean, I still love heavy metal, but yeah, I started to get into Pantera, um, Corn. Not sure if that's considered heavy metal, but
Well, it's all heavier music, certainly.
yeah,
It's
I
guys
started to
wearing
get
black,
yeah, I mean, started to get into heavier music, dark music,
which makes
and
sense.
then yeah, and then I also that's when I really started to get into country music and old music. I really started to I always loved like 50s and 60s music because I grew up with that with my parents. My parents listened to everything, but they would listen to their oldies music a lot. And I started really getting back into it again. Um, and I started to get into country more on my own. My parents kind of listened to country. They would like listen to Willie Nelson and Kenny Rogers, but they weren't diehard country music fans. And then I really, really started to get into country music, and I'm a diehard country music fan now.
Wow. Do you sing or play instruments, or are you musical at all? Dancing?
Oh, I can bust a move.
I believe it. I believe
I
it.
yeah.
You're better than the average white girl, but you're not obnoxious about it. Not
Yeah,
because
I just like to dance and have a good time. My parents really love to dance. So that was just something I grew up with. Was I grew up around dancing. My mom would just start dancing in the kitchen, you know. And my dad loved to dance too. Uh so yeah, and it was funny when Adam and I got married. We had such a fun wedding, and my whole family's on the dance floor. It's me, my sisters, my mom, and my one cousin says to my other cousin, he was like, "I think Alice is the only one who got Aunt Mary's dance moves because the twins can not dance." But yeah, the other kids didn't pick up on it, but I loved it, and um I have living room concerts. Uh drives Adam nuts sometimes because I turn the TV at full blast and I dance and sing. And no, I am a terrible singer, but I'm gonna sing, and you're just gonna have to deal.
You can get better at singing. Anyone can learn to. That's what I believe. Anyone can learn to carry a tune, but it does take some time to like get that muscle memory and match up the tones. Like I don't know, I mess around a little bit with the music, and like I'm pretty monotone, Bob Dylan-y, but do re mi and learning the do re mi will get you pretty far. That lady in that movie was onto something, I think, with that.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. And then a lot of times, when I am singing and dancing, I've had a few beers. And yeah, I can only imagine. But Hex
It's
is
fun.
probably, besides my husband at this point, I think Hex is the only person that has seen me so many times, like in prime Alice mode, where I'm just singing, dancing, just having the best time. But yeah, I just clean and dance and sing and have a few beers, and that's my mom time.
Not a bad. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not a bad life at all. What about going through like high school age? Well, I guess earlier, like middle school. I know you're saying that's when your dad got sick in middle
Yeah.
school, and I'm sure life got challenging getting into heavy metal. So I guess I'll just kind of let you continue on the journey through middle school, high school, and whatnot.
So during middle school, I was also dealing with abuse. And one of the people, I will say who it was, and it was a family friend. And I was scared to say anything. He had done stuff to me when I was like 9, and then he left for the military, and he came home, and he kind of started, I had blossomed too, and he started getting touchy-feely with me again, so I was dealing with that while dealing with my dad being sick, and then I had somebody else in my life who was being physically abusive, and I didn't want to say anything and upset my parents. Eventually, I did tell them about the physical abuse, and they got me counseling and they got me help, and they made it where I was never in that situation again, with that person anymore. So I went through middle school dealing with all that. And then you're dealing with just being a teenager, and just dealing with boys and those feelings. And girls are brutal. Like, girls are so, they can be so brutal. So I was very unhappy, but I didn't really always show it in front of people. I still just kind of laughed through things. And then when I got to high school, which is around 15, my parents were losing their business, and they were pretty much never around anymore. My dad was going to doctor's appointments all the time. I would go to some of them with them. And then when they were losing their business, they didn't have as many hired help anymore. So my parents were closing the business at night, which was open till midnight, which means they didn't get home till 1:30 in the morning, which meant 15-year-old me was home alone. So I partied. I didn't get into like really any crazy stuff at that age, but I would drink, I would smoke weed, and somehow I still made honor roll. I was in the National Honor Society, and it was kind of, this sounds so deep, but it just really was what it was. There was this very angry, sad part of me because this whole life that I had before all this was so just regular and good, and now like things aren't good anymore. And but I wanted to kind of still be the good kid that I was before, and I wanted to do good in school, and I wanted to go to college, but then I was like, but I'm kind of in a lot of pain, and smoking weed and drinking feels awfully good. um and then by the time I got to my sophomore year, I just got worse and worse and worse. Don't remember a lot of my sophomore year. I know that sounds really bad. I remember
You've been through a lot, though. Damn, I'm sorry to hear all that. Wow, I knew some of this stuff, but not all. But no one deserves that. No child deserves all that. Like, it's hard to like deal with these
No.
issues and want to speak up. Like, if anyone like in your situations, sad to hear, would want to hear that. But like, it's hard as an adult to sometimes because you don't want to bother anyone. There's shame, there's embarrassment, whatever this awful situation may be. But it's like, those are hard things for adults to speak up about, let alone a child who's confused and doesn't fully understand. That's just awful.
Yeah. I
You're an
mean,
inspiration. Damn, look at you. You're just fucking,
okay.
you're like, okay, you're funny. Like the laughter is a defense mechanism, but it's not. But it's not. It's not necessarily an unhealthy defense mechanism. It's coping. Does the term coping mechanism, does that have a negative connotation? Whatever the one is that doesn't carry the negative
No, coping
connotation.
mechanisms are, I mean, they can be good and they can be bad. But
Right.
I think laughter is a good thing. My parents laughed a lot, so I get
Yeah.
that. I get that from them. Yeah, they laugh through the worst of times. It's not that we don't feel or get sad, but it's
Right.
just,
Exactly.
what are you going to do? You can't sit around being miserable all the time, so might as well laugh at it.
Survival mechanism. Survival. It's whatever it is. I don't know. I'll think of the term 3 hours. 3 hours from now. But damn, that's a wild. You had like two different childhoods. Almost seemed like.
Yeah. I most definitely did. I would tell people it's just it's what almost felt like my life was painted on a piece of glass, and it was this beautiful painting, and then somebody just came up and smashed my painting into pieces, you know. And my siblings were not all so much older, but I mean, by the time my dad couldn't walk, my siblings were all in their 20s, some were in their 30s, so it was a much different thing I'm not saying it wasn't hard on them. I'm just saying it's much different for a child or a young teenager to wrap that around their brain than, wrap it around
Sure.
an adult brain. I almost said I'm in my 30s, but I'm not. In my 40s. But I was in my 30s not that long ago, and I just think that would be a much, much different thing to take on. But yeah, when I was 17 is when I was a junior in high school is when I told my counselor about the sexual abuse, and I didn't know this, but she was like, "Well, I have to report that." I was like, "Oh, fuck." So which meant my mom found out, and we kept it from my dad, and I was fine with that because I didn't want to upset my dad. He was home from the hospital, in a wheelchair, adjusting to that. And yeah, they did try and prosecute him, and it didn't go through. But then he ended up going crazy and shot a cop in Texas and went to jail. And then I think like 10 years ago, they started doing rape kits for Cleveland, and his DNA came up in a couple of them. I was like, see, I tried to tell all of you that he
Yeah.
was a horrible, horrible person. And that's one of the reasons I get really like, I don't say as much about it anymore because I've gotten really upset about it on Twitter. Is I'm not saying we shouldn't be aware of what's going on with the left and their want to get close to kids, but you need to be aware of the really nice, good people too. Because he was a well respected person in our town. He was a star football player. He went to the military. He served in Iraq. He's such a good guy. And then, yeah, the real him just started coming out. His wife left him. And then he was on the road in Texas and a cop pulled him over. I'm not even sure why. And he shot the cop. And I felt so bad because I used to pray that something would happen that would have him not be able to hurt any children anymore. And even like, I'm not a huge fan of cops, but I also don't want a father of 3 children to die. Like, I'm not that person. I know there are people that are like that. And I felt so bad because I prayed and I'm like, oh my God, I prayed for this to happen. But thankfully the police officer recovered. And even though he didn't die, that guy will be in jail for the rest of his life. And then his name coming up in the rape kits didn't do him any good either. So
Wow.
thankfully he's at least in jail.
Damn, what a story. Damn.
Yeah, sometimes it's the people you never expect. And I try and tell people, groomers try and groom you too as the parent. They try and get you to trust them. Like, you're a good person. You would never hurt their child. Your child is safe with me. And they really put in time and effort to do that. And some people are just already trusted. They're an aunt, they're an uncle, they're this, they're that. I don't really leave my kids with like anybody. Like, pretty much nobody takes my kids. After my mom died, it is so rare that somebody watches our kids for us.
What
Yes.
about when they're with like other kids' parents or friends' parents or friends? You live with friends and friends' parents?
So my daughter, she's getting older, so she's 13. So, she has a phone with her. I'm not, she was over a friend's house last week, and I just tell her, do not ask me for sleepovers. She's had a couple sleepovers since she's been around this age, and I kind of look back and I'm like, I didn't feel comfortable with it. So I'm like, just don't ask me for sleepovers. You can hang out with your friend, we meet their parents, stuff like that, but my son has like rarely been around other people by himself. Mostly though, because he's a lot to deal with.
Did they get mad at you for restricting their whatever?
So my daughter used to a lot because she would look at other kids her age, and there apparently like a lot of parents just let their kids just have their phone 24 hours a day. And I don't see any reason for that, for them to have their phone 24 hours a day. So she used to get mad about it. I think she's woken up a lot though the past year and just kind of seeing how her friends' lives are and how it's not just that their parents let them keep their phone all the time. Their parents don't really care about them that much. They don't spend time with them. They don't take their kids to do stuff. One of her friends Now, she lived with her grandmother and her grandfather because her mom was a heroin addict. So we're already there. So we're already like starting off not well. But the grandma and grandpa were nice people. But yeah, she was just allowed to have her phone all the time. And the one day we were talking about Cedar Point, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we got Cedar Point passes for the family, but we never go." And I'm like, "Well, we'll take her." And I was just like, "Why do you get your kids Cedar Point passes and you don't take them to Cedar Point?" If you're not familiar, Cedar Point's it's the roller coaster America capital, whatever. We go all the time. And yeah, it's I think, she's starting to realize like, oh, their parents just don't want them around. And that's why they're just allowed to sit on their phone all day and all night.
I feel like every conversation I've had with someone or every like podcast I listen to where someone talks about how they grew up and something about their upbringing that my parents never let me have or do blah 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 that all the other kids do, and I was upset about it or I didn't like it at the time or I didn't understand it at the time, like all of those things they're thankful for later in life, like almost
Right.
every single one, even if they disagree with that at a time, even if they end up getting some other different lesson out of it or something unrelated or just like the broad strokes of whatever the intention of the parent was, like they almost always are thankful for that thing that's like, oh, thank you for not letting me be like just like the other kids in whatever way it is.
Yeah, I'm so thankful for how strict my parents were. Now, in my like teenage years, they weren't around as much, it's one of the reasons I did end up switching to homeschooling. And one of the reasons I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, because I thought about my childhood. And granted, some of the reasons my parents weren't around were unforeseen circumstances, but I'm just like, I'm going to be all up in their business.
Oh boy. Oh man.
Yeah.
I see why though. I get it. It makes sense based on everything we've talked about so far. Why you would go maybe a tiny bit too. I mean, do other people give you feedback on your, I guess, parenting and like that you maybe do a little bit too hands on? Do people ever give you that feedback? I'm not saying you aren't necessarily, but I could see how people might think that.
I think most people understand why.
Right, exactly.
All up and there and it's not that like if my daughter's texting her friend, I'm like, what are you doing? Who are you texting? What do you say? I mean, I'm not like that. I do give my kid space to be a kid. I just don't to be a kid with other kids, I should say. My daughter's allowed to be a kid when, whatever, but the space to be a kid with other kids and have their own time, I just want to keep that time very limited because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I know there's a lot of people that look at the 80s and 90s and they just think it was so great. I'm just like, it was so awful. Kids were depressed. They were coming from broken homes. They were being abused. They were being sexually abused. They were being ignored. I watched so many of my friends get addicted to drugs. Some of those friends have died. I think like off the top of my head, at least 4 or 5 died. One of my best friends from high school, dead, heroin overdose. So I look at those times and I don't think it was good that we were left to roam about on our own as much as we were. I don't think that was healthy. I don't think that's good. And we're living in much different times. Kids are not taking their bike to the creek or something and throwing rocks in the water. Kids, even back in my day, they were doing drugs. They were drinking a lot. I mean, I would smoke pot and drink, but my other friends were getting addicted to heavy drugs. They had friends that were huffers. Do you remember the huffing? Like puffing
Right.
aerosol, stuff like that. I mean, I want to give my kid as little time as I can to keep her away from drugs, away from alcohol, away from being with boys alone, and from being heavily influenced by all these new things we have going on, you know?
Right. I don't know if it's still the case today at this very moment, but I remember reading articles, whatever, about how like even like marijuana use was like is like down amongst like the youth, but like other things that, are more dangerous, whatever it may be, is up from, club drugs to something all the way up to like heroin. Obviously there's the fentanyl stuff going on. So it's like there's definitely a lot of danger out there. So I get it. I'm not trying to cross Mama Bear. Nobody's
No, I mean, no,
Mhm.
it's an honest question, and I think maybe years ago people would have felt that way. At first with my daughter, there were people that are like, you hover on her too much, you want to be with her too much. And I just think she's my child. I grew her inside of me. She's 3. Of course I want to be with her. But yeah, when I would talk about how I wanted to parent, and this is before I even started doing the homeschool thing. But yeah, I wanted to be all up. When my kid was in school, I was up in that school every day for enough to see what was going on. Like I would help the other little kids when she was in kindergarten. I would volunteer. Always made sure as she got bigger, make sure she gets to her desk. Like I was that mom, and I wanted to know her teachers, and I wanted her teachers to know me. And it's a good thing I did, because her teachers were comfortable coming up to me and talking to me, and I was comfortable talking to them. Um, but yeah, people would think it like was weirder back then, but I think now more people are understanding. But I think
I bet.
I think even just with the way I grew up in the 80s and 90s, I'm like, kids should not be out like that and doing these kinds of things, I mean, I'm not saying the 50s and stuff were completely innocent, but the worst thing my mom did was her and her friends snuck a couple bottles of liquor upstairs and would sit outside the window smoking cigarettes. It was like the worst thing she did. Me, I'm like smoking pot, getting drunk, not drinking like crazy like my other friends. I wouldn't drink at parties because I saw a lot of girls that would end up having sex and then they would regret it the next day. And I was like, I am not doing that. But yeah, I mean, I would see people doing like a lot of drugs. I dabbled in it a little bit, but yeah, kids are stupid and they should just not be running amok.
They're not fully formed people, not fully formed creatures. So it's like, yeah, not capable of making rational decisions all the
No.
time. But we think so at the time. We think we're doing the right things.
And people think like, oh no, my kid wouldn't do that. I'm like, well, I don't know. I know myself. I know my husband. I don't think my kids are bad kids, but I think they're normal kids. I
Mhm.
think, my daughter definitely has rebellion in her. We're seeing that more as she's getting older. She was much more easier to deal with when she was younger. Now my son, he just came out like ready to not do anything the way you're supposed to do things.
What are their names?
Scarlett and Grayson.
Nice.
We actually named our kids on our second date.
Wow.
So, yeah. And
you stuck with the names.
And we stuck with the names. A lot of people wondered if we would. I always wanted to name my daughter Scarlett from Gone with the Wind, Scarlett O'Hara. And then Adam and I were on our second date. We were talking about having kids, and he said, well, if I have a boy, I want to name him a junior. And I'm like, nope, nope, no, 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 no. I can't do a junior because I have juniors in my family and I get confused, especially my one cousin. His name was Georgie growing up, but then he was like, stop calling me Georgie. I'm a 40-year-old man. So my mom would say, oh, George went and did this. And I'm like, Uncle George did what? She's like, no, your cousin George. And it would just get confusing. And there were some other juniors in the family, and it would just annoy me. So we're from Ohio. Adam and I are both Ohio State fans, and their colors are scarlet and gray. And I said, well, I want to name my daughter Scarlet, and Grayson is a pretty cool name. I'm like, so why don't we name our kids Scarlet and Grayson? And Adam was like, deal.
And Greg, like there's an obvious play on words, gray sun.
Yeah.
That was the SON. You guys picked up on that? Yeah, you noticed that?
Oh,
that is great. That SON, the word sun, is in the name Grayson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we named our kids over some chicken wings and beer.
Nice.
On our second date. So, and yeah, I remember when I was pregnant with Grayson, and our neighbor, his buddy that we were really close to too, said, I can't wait to see if you actually name that boy Grayson. He was like, because I don't believe you're going to go through with it. And I'm like, I'm totally going to go through with it.
Well, it's not like it's not a name. It's not like you're naming him it's not super duper outside the box.
Yeah, they're nice names. They're not totally everyday names, but they're not weird names.
They're kind of last names as first names, which is kind of a thing.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and
could be.
We could have named them like Wine and Gold after the Cavs. That would have been weird. But yeah, I mean, it's just that's how we came to that agreement. So
good
my
stuff.
daughter's been named forever. She's been named since I was like 15 years old. I wanted to name my daughter Scarlett. So yeah, it's a good way to spend a second date.
Well, when I'm not going to say the letters, but when you know, you know. I feel like we've covered a lot. We didn't talk as much about your husband or your journey meeting him, or like because you did say you moved a lot. Did you say that earlier? Or am I imagining?
Yeah,
that?
I moved a few times after I started dating Adam. We moved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Within Ohio or all over the country, or?
No, just within Ohio.
Oh, okay. For some reason I was like, oh, maybe she was in a military family.
No,
you're just somebody who's just moved a few too many times than you wanted to.
Yeah, because before that, I had only moved once. I moved into an apartment with a ex now he obviously is an ex now, and his friend. I lived there for like a year and a half, came back home, did not move again. And then, I met my husband and moved in one apartment, moved into another apartment, moved into a house, moved into a different house. Then we moved into this house. And I was like, I am not doing this again.
It's hard. I moved in an apartment building from one unit to another, and just that was like a pain in the ass. And like,
I hate moving, and moving with kids, is awful. It's I don't even know. I don't know how people purposely do that so many times. I guess if you have to, but I mean, I know people, they buy this huge, beautiful house. Well, I know people that even had a house built, and still with kids, they were like, you know what? This isn't exactly what we wanted. And they move again.
Well, I mean, it's a necessary evil, I suppose. But it's like it's such a pain in the ass. From what I understand, I can't speak to it, but I think it's a pain in the ass even for really wealthy people, because in some regards you're spending more money and you have more stuff. Even if people do it for you, you're still worried about things and how is everyone going to handle this, and like, and you're not out of the like logistics of it because you got to
Yeah, you have to tell them.
coordinate with
Yeah.
the coordinators and all this stuff, and it's just your life is uprooting your life. Like, it's a huge pain in the ass. That's why there's all these like tropes and comedies, I guess, about like, you know, the friend helping someone move and no one wanting to do it, or if you help your friend move, you're the greatest person in the world, kind of stuff. I appreciate your journey, and I'm sorry that you've been through some awful things in your life, and it's good to see you smiling and laughing and whatnot. Damn, I remember. I think I'm having flashbacks because I didn't hear about all your stuff, you know, that happened directly to you, but like about your dad, like I have heard you talk about him, and like I was like, damn, that's emotional, and like I think that's definitely, you know, stuff that I appreciate hearing about and whatnot for sure. What we want to talk about, anything else you're working on these days? I know you're doing the Scissor Me Timbers with Forest Mommy here and there. Maybe we'll get some new
Yeah.
episodes of that soon.
So my husband and I were doing put a fork in it every other Friday. And at first I was like, well, maybe in February I'll get back into it, but yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to go about it because I miss doing it, but it's just sometimes
Life.
it's a lot to be when you do a stream. It's like you have to be there at this certain time, this time of the week. You don't want to flip flop around your times too much, and it's just, yeah. And then it's just, I do have somebody who said that they would be willing to kind of co-host with me because I don't like to be on my own. I think that's the part of growing up with 5 kids and your parents still together. Like, I'm okay, like, alone in my house just doing my thing, but stuff like that, I don't wanna do alone. So, I don't know, hopefully, I will get back to doing Put a Fork in It on Fridays. If not, I think my episodes are still up on my YouTube and my Rumble, and they're both Alice Always 911. So, and there's some fun episodes that we did, like with Jess, um, and then like Paul and Doug and stuff. Hex has been on
Nice.
there a couple of times, so it's been fun.
I don't know
Hopefully, I'll
any.
do it again.
Yeah, well, I don't know anything about anything, but I would say like maybe because you seem to enjoy it, like you were just speaking to, like maybe it's not like worth it to like hold yourself. Either I'm gonna schedule it on Friday and do it then, or I'm not
Right,
gonna do it at all. Maybe just do it more like when you feel like it, because you get enjoyment out of it, and not worry about like people I need to like rely, or like an audience is expecting me to do this and this. I feel like for myself, I mean, just I haven't been as
right.
prolific with this podcast as I'd like to be, but enough so where I have no plans to stop doing it anytime soon, because I get so much out of the conversations, and enough people are saying the same. So I would say like, you know, do it spontaneously. Like,
I do. I enjoy talking to different people. I love hearing people's
I can
stories.
tell. I can tell
Um,
both of those things.
Yeah, I do. I love hearing people's stories. And yeah, sometimes it's like how this conversation was, where it's like, oh, like, didn't quite know all that, and it, like, sometimes you do hear really sad stuff, but I feel kind of bad saying this, but it kind of makes you respect that person more because you're like, wow, I had no idea that you went through all that, and that.
Well,
So
the
yeah,
last thing we want as a people and a species is to have conversations with each other and get to understand each other better. That's the last thing we need on this planet. We need the opposite of that, right? We need more division and more hatred and less understanding and less conversation, less meaningful
right.
conversation, less listening to.
That's a great.
That's the last thing we want to do, is listen to other people. We just want to just yell and be full of rage. I think that's the
Yeah,
way.
call people names and
Yeah. Oh, I asked you about ghosts, and you kind of touched on that. I don't know if you had any other like beliefs that you want to share about ghosts, whether you seem to definitely believe on some level, but if you had any other noteworthy experiences or even aliens, UFOs, thoughts on those, and experiences with those. I try to remember to ask everyone that.
I've never had experiences with UFOs, but I definitely think that there's some other kind of life out there. And
But-
yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder if it's all connected, like the afterlife, the universe. I don't know. It gets big when you start thinking about that kind of stuff. When you start really thinking about how big the universe is, how things work, I could go on.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of directions we go. It's I'm just thinking about how you sort of, in some regards, like some people were insinuating that you conjured up, like, being haunted by your dad or whatever the case may be, just by believing in that possibility. But most people don't like conjure up aliens in the same way, I guess, because it's so unknown and we don't know what they look like, so it's hard to like be like, if I believe, then they're gonna appear. But like with the ghost thing, there seems to be some evidence where that like works, where there's like some kind of like, connection to someone from the past who passed away. Like, you can make that
Yeah.
happen. Enough people have had stories like that, but rarely is people are like, I love aliens. Although it is a lot of the time that people who maybe do seek out the UFOs, the hunters. That's a different thing. I don't know. I'm rambling about this stuff. It is an interesting topic though. Anything else you think we should cover or talk about? Is your mom still around these days? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, my mom actually died before my dad did. So
Damn.
that was actually kind of shocking because everybody thought my dad would die before my mom because he died 3 years after her. But my mom died pretty much in the living room here. She had a heart attack.
Damn.
Yeah. So
I somehow missed that. Like, damn, but that provides
no,
a
I
lot
didn't. I
even more
did.
context. Hey, you needed more things terrible to happen to you in your adolescence and teen years.
I mean, I was an adult when that happened, but I did end up.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but what do you mean adult? You said you were 17 when your dad.
Oh, when my dad got sick, yeah, I was 17.
When he got sick, but when he passed, you were.
I was an adult.
You were an adult, and your mom was a few years before then. I got you.
We all moved in here, Adam, the kids. So I was honestly changing my son's diaper and then having to go clean up my dad. And it's a very crazy realization in life, seeing the beginning of life and the end of life and kind of how similar they can be in ways. But yeah, my mom, she passed away pretty much in here too. So I'm like, there's definitely weird stuff that happens. And yeah, people will be like, it's just a coincidence. I've been talking to my mom so much lately in my head, sometimes out loud a little bit. And the other day I fell asleep on the couch and I woke up to Steel Magnolias, it was me and my mom's movie. And the last time I saw my mom, that movie was on. Like, I can recite most of that movie. It's a great movie. It's a great movie about the love of a mother and daughter and the strength of women. It actually celebrates women's actual strengths that they have.
What are those? I didn't tell me. This is news to me.
Like being caretakers. Have you ever seen Steel Magnolia?
No, I guess not recently. If I have,
but you remember, so the daughter dies at the end, and one of the things that sticks out in my head is how Malin says, Sally Fields, the mom says, I stayed with her, after they pulled the plug. She was like, I stayed there and I held her hand. Her dad left, her husband left, but I was the one who stayed there and held her hand. Because those are women's strengths. I'm not saying women can't work construction and can't do this, but like, women are beautiful when it comes to caretaking. When my dad was sick, it was mostly us girls I'm not saying my brothers didn't do stuff, but in the end, it was me. And my dad even said to me, have girls because they can take better care of you. And like he meant it funny, but he was like, that is a beautiful part of women, is how nurturing and caretaking they are. But yeah, that movie was on when I woke up, and I have not watched that movie since the day that the last time I saw my mom. And it just felt like it was kind of this sign that I needed to sit there and watch this movie. And let me tell you, I sobbed the whole way through. My husband actually sat and watched it with me, which I thought was really nice. I thought he was just going to go back to sleep. Um, but he's really, really good with me when it comes to grieving. Like I don't need somebody all up on me. You can like give me a little pat or hold my hand, but just let me go through what I'm going to go through. And yeah, I just sat there crying, watching the movie. And then I'm not joking. Later on, I came in here and one of these stupid musical things started playing by itself. And I'm like, Adam, honey, this thing is just playing music on its own.
There's a lot going on in that home.
Yeah. So maybe I am conjuring them. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I was talking to my mom a lot and yeah. So
you got the powers.
Yeah, I did. My daughter wants to get a Ouija board, and I'm like, we're not bringing a Ouija board in this house.
I think that's probably smart. I think the Ouija board, you're kind of asking for trouble. Are you not asking for trouble? I think you're better off going to a medium or someone like that who they legitimately,
Yeah.
I don't know, trust, have some kind of track record, referral. Like I would almost like, because I think just like anyone, like you're describing out in the world, some people are nice, some people are mean, some people are skeevy, some people are not. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely cheats and scam artists out there, but I think there are people out there who, I mean, this is something probably I've come around more on space on these days, but like, the idea that there's mediums out there maybe who are legit. And like, if you believe and they believe, like, you know, the Ouija board, you're just asking for like, I don't know. That's asking for trouble.
Nope. Not one coming in my house. My daughter, and I did the same thing when I was her age. I wanted to like do witchy stuff with my girlfriends. And I'm just like, that's not happening in my house. Not happening. No, we're not messing with that. She's like, but mom, why? It's not anything bad. And I'm like, I've seen The Craft. We're not doing this.
Yeah. Maybe one time rent an Ouija board.
She can go to a hotel or something when she's 18 and she can go play with the Ouija board there.
That's funny. That's a funny image. Like not drinking, not smoking, not doing anything worse, not boys. It's like, all right, it's time. We're finally allowed. We break out the Ouija board. On that note, thank you so much for the time and the stories and sharing so much personal stuff. Where can people follow you? I'm guessing Twitter, your podcast you mentioned before, but I'll give you the floor to plug away or whatever. Say whatever you need to say.
So as far as social media, I'm only on Twitter. Alice Always 911. I don't say a lot on there, but usually it's just wholesome stuff like my dog or my cats or about my boy. And then Rumble is Alice Always 911. Same with YouTube, Alice Always 911, and you can see our past episodes. And if you want, you can follow Forest Mommy on Rumble, and I'm on the SMT episodes. Maybe a Golden Showers here and there, but SMT.
Scissor Me Timbers and Golden Showers are Forest Mommy's podcast. It's not what it sounds like.
No.
I was gonna say, oh, you guys are opposites because you're wholesome and she's maybe not as wholesome all the time. But like, despite all the antics and the bold tweets, like she kind of is. You guys are all good people, good people.
Yeah.
You don't have to be wholesome to be a good person, I guess. Maybe.
No, my husband says FM and Jess and I. He's like, you guys are completely different, but exactly alike. Because we're both just kind of just fun people. We don't care what other people do. We're not worried about your life because we're worried about ourselves. I don't care if that sounds vain because it's true. I am more worried about myself than I am other people. And we click in that way. So it doesn't matter, you know. So
People's you go on.
I think Jess is like, even though with like the sexy pics and stuff, I think Jess is actually like a pretty wholesome woman. You know, she like just loves her man. She loves her dog and her, well, sadly Tanner passed away. R.I.P. King Tanner.
But she loves animals and nature and all that. I think like
Yeah.
people can sort of behave a little bit differently, have different personalities, have different lifestyles and lives, but like a lot of the values I think probably is what really overlaps and whatnot. But good stuff all around. I'll say goodbye in a second, but you don't have to hang up. That's just the end of the recording, obviously. But I think that's all I got for now. Good stuff all around.
Well, thank you for having me on. This was fun. I haven't done like a meet's the only other podcast I did that was like pre-recorded. So I don't know why I'm more nervous doing this than I am a live stream.
Oh, me too. Me too. Same exact way. I do a fair amount of live streams also for different show. But yeah, I
Right.
get it. Good stuff always, Alice. Always talk soon.
All right. Have a good night.
You got it. Later. So there you have it. Episode 151 with Alice always. That woman has been through a lot in her life. I certainly complain way too much. I really do wish her husband and her kids and her family the best. I definitely appreciate her time and all the personal stories, and that Alice is able to laugh and smile somewhat through all of, really throughout, I guess, all of life's craziness that it gets thrown her way. But for everything about this show, of course, head to peoplewelovepodcast.com. That's at People We Love Podcast on Instagram. I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to follow me, adamchoit.com for all my other projects and stuff. But I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you as always. And let's talk soon. Peace.